I've said it before and I'll say it again, the Aptera is going to be a sleeper hit as a camping vehicle, but especially in winter. Hear me out. Obviously, I'm not going to be 4x4ing this thing up into the mountains, but it will handle a little bit of snow, probably a lot better than you think it might. The biggest criticism I hear when it comes to the Aptera and doing any sort of off-roading is those coverings over the wheels. And although it doesn't look like it, there actually is a fair amount of clearance between those things and the ground. With the off-road package, you're looking at 7 inches of clearance between those wheel pants and the ground. Even if that isn't enough clearance, I can remove those wheel pants entirely because they're only on there for aerodynamics, can expose the entire wheel and have a lot more clearance to work with. Not to mention it's a 3-wheel drive vehicle, which means there's no dead weight with any of the wheels when it comes to traction. And another criticism that gets levied against EVs in general is that they're a lot heavier than their gas counterparts, which leads to them sinking in snow and sand and sliding around on gradients. But the Aptera was specifically designed to be super lightweight. So say for instance you take a 4-wheel drive Tesla Model Y with a total curb weight of 4,100 pounds, that's about 1,025 pounds per wheel. Whereas the Aptera, even though it's only a 3-wheeled vehicle, you're still only looking at a total curb weight of 1,800 pounds or 600 pounds per wheel. It's a heck of a lot lighter. Now, to be super clear, for like actual hardcore overlanding, I'm still gonna have an electric truck to get out to the really hard to reach places. But for winter cross-country road trips where I'm just camping at established drive-up campsites or just off of fire access roads, I actually think the Aptera is gonna be able to manage it pretty well. And as for its size, the Aptera is probably a lot larger than what most people would think at first glance. Their first impression seems to be that it's a relatively small car, but it's actually a full-size car. It's only a little bit shorter than my Tesla Model 3 and actually a tiny bit wider in the wheelbase up front. And it only has 2 seats up front, and the rest of it is just one long cargo bed. They can either store a whole bunch of winter camping gear or use as a sleeping space. Much like Teslas and pretty much any other modern EV, it'll have its own version of camp mode, which will let you keep the HVAC running overnight as well as keep the temperature set. But the big difference comes because, unlike pretty much every other car on the road which uses a metal frame, the Aptera uses carbon fiber and fiberglass, which is a lot more insulating. Combined with the fact that it's a smaller space that it has to keep warm, it'll be a lot more efficient at keeping that temperature as you set it overnight without consuming a large portion of the battery. And on top of all of that, the Aptera has an advantage that pretty much no other EV has, and that is the 700-watt solar generator that'll pretty much be carting around with me everywhere I go, that's integrated into the complete top of the Aptera, from the hood, over the top, all the way over the trunk. And of course, it's wired directly into charging the car battery so that if you use camp mode to keep the car warm overnight, you're recapturing at least some of that energy used overnight during the day from the solar. As for me personally, I do a lot of cold camping in the winter, so I probably won't use the HVAC to keep the car warm, which means all of that solar energy that I'm capturing can go into running things like an induction stovetop, keeping all of my electronics charged without dipping into the car's remaining battery. Or I can not tap into that extra solar power at all and just let it continue to charge the car while I'm at camp. Now, obviously in winter, solar is nowhere near as effective as it is during the summer, but even if I'm only pulling 100 watts average from the solar, that still equates to about 10 extra kilometers added back to my range per day. All this to say that right from the factory, the Aptera is as practically off-grid as it possibly can be. And you bet that when I get mine, we're going to do some cross-country road trips off of just what it manages to charge with the solar. The elephant in the room is obviously that in cold temperatures, the colder it gets, the more it affects lithium batteries, to the tune of losing 30% range in minus 20 degrees Celsius and losing half in minus 30 degrees Celsius. All modern EVs have a way to heat the battery in these cold conditions. Normally this happens while the car is plugged in and charging, or it has to dip into the available capacity in the battery to heat it up. But think about this, with the available solar power, you can essentially use the solar to warm up your battery to the proper operating temperature for free without having to dip into your battery capacity. And even if you ignore all of that and just look at its actual available battery capacity and range, with just the 40 kilowatt hour battery pack that's coming in the Launch Edition, the version that I have reserved, that's a 643 kilometer range off of one charge. And keep in mind, the spec I have reserved is on the lower end. At the top end is a 100 kilowatt hour battery, which, according to them, should be capable of 1,600 kilometers on a single charge. For reference, that can bring me pretty much all the way from Toronto to Halifax without having to stop and charge. So at first glance, obviously the Aptera looks like a space-age commuter car. But if you ignore the aesthetics and ignore all the marketing and the demographic it's actually being pointed towards and just look at the specs, it's a surprisingly capable EV. And if you guys are interested in reserving an Aptera, I do have an affiliate link in the description. Not only does it save you guys $30 off your $100 reservation fee, but it also helps make mine just a little bit cheaper when I take delivery. And like I said, I am really looking forward to showing you guys firsthand what this thing is capable of.